for this very summit. And I'm talking about AI, not ChatGPT, but AI. And the next workshop we are going to talk about AI, and that is going to be with another great speaker. So this great speaker is going to be talking about generative AI as it relates to government. Um, is a strategic chameleon. She currently is a manager of tech strategy and transformation at Ernst& Young, using her technical knowledge, work ethic, and problem-solving skills to adapt to any professional environment and provide game-changing IT solutions for all her clients. Speaking on harnessing the power of generative AI in government, please show some love for Queen Duncan.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are having a blessed and wonderful day. And I am super, super excited to talk to you all a bit about generative AI, especially as it pertains to the government. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so as Kofi mentioned, my name is Queen Duncan, and my session today is around how to safely harness the power of generative AI in the government sector. So I know not everyone works in the government in the session today. In fact, some of you may not even be using Gen AI or even be in the tech space, and I know there are also growing concerns around AI. However, for those of you who don't work in the government or are familiar with Gen AI, the insights to be shared in this session can help ease your mind and reduce your hesitancy, especially when it comes to government usage of this technology. And then for my folks who are in tech, who are using or plan to explore generative AI, this will also give you a better sense of what can be done in this space around Gen AI safely. And then if you are a government consultant like myself, well, this is a great way to also ease the minds of your clients who could be hesitant, and you can just kind of showcase to them that they can leverage Gen AI for their day to day work activities. And of course, they can be more efficient and it can be used safely. The key word for today is safe. So, what is the journey around my session today? So, of course, I'll start off with an overview to set the tone and whet your palate a little bit on what Gen AI is and a few examples. Then we'll go into the benefits and opportunities of incorporating Gen AI into government operations. Then we'll touch on the safety concerns and considerations. As I mentioned before, we know there are growing concerns around AI taking over our jobs and stealing data. So, of course, we have to address those. And then we'll also address the security measures to safeguard the risk, and then touch on some of the worldwide compliance and privacy laws. And then, of course, we'll round it out with some use cases to give you all real world examples of what's happening in this space. Okay, so who am I? So I'm just going to do a brief introduction of myself. So, as Kofi mentioned, I am a tech strategy manager at Ernst& Young, which is one of the big four accounting firms. And I specifically work in the consulting sector, working with state and local government clients. So I have two computer science degrees. I have my undergrad from Georgia State and my master's from Georgia Tech. I kind of rep both evenly, but I think some of my friends will say I rep Georgia Tech a little bit more. I mean, honestly, that degree was blood, sweat, and tears. So it's only right that I rep it as hard as I can. So I have 10 plus years in the tech industry. I've worked in various roles such as software development, technical project management, and then, of course, in my current role now in strategy consulting. I am from Ghana, West Africa, proud, born, partially raised, hence the more American accent. So shout out to all my Africans in the session today. And I do come from a very, very large family. I have 8 siblings. Well, I have 7 siblings total, and of course, we are 8, including myself. And just real quick, because I wanted to add some fun things in here. So, 3 things I can't live without, of course, would be the Bible app, because we always have to rep our Lord and personal Savior, Jesus Christ, and of course, my family, family and friends, and then traveling. As a millennial, I think we are all obsessed with traveling. So traveling is just a great way to kind of get our minds off of work. and just do a reset. All right. So, an overview of generative AI. So, what is Gen AI? So, you can kind of look at it as a smart assistant that can be imaginative and generate content without being explicitly told exactly what to do, word for word. And how great is that? And even better, there's no attitude or back talk, we were talking about an assistant, right? So there are various types of Gen AI models out there. And I mean, I know you all have heard of some of the popular ones. So just real quick, we'll just talk about some of a few examples around generative AI. So we all know about ChatGPT, which can create coherent and contextually relevant text on input prompts. There are great image generation models such as DALI, which is capable of generating images based on text prompts that you input. There are really cool AI powered like reading and writing companions that can help fix like grammatical errors in any type of writing tones, and that is called WordTune. And then there is Jasper. So we can leverage Jasper for like creative material and help you answer, different queries. And then there is Synthesia, which is also cool for making realistic videos and modifying any existing ones. So here are just a few examples of generative AI. And as we see, they're evolving. So there are many, many more in this list, but of course, these are just a few examples. Okay, so how does this translate to usage in government operations? So, in essence, incorporating Gen AI does offer several potential benefits, such as improving efficiency, decision making, and overall citizen services like you and I and everyone else on this session. So, we'll just talk about some of the benefits and opportunities in the space. So we know that around data analysis, it can definitely help analyze vast amounts of data very quickly and aid in the decision making around policy formulation, just based on the data driven insights. And then as we're talking about data analysis, we'll also take a look into the policy simulation. So the AI models can help policymakers, understand potential outcomes and better refine their decisions before implementing some of these policies. For example, I think back to policies such as the three strike laws back in the 90s, and we see how that greatly impacted people of color. So leveraging AI for such policies like that could help these policymakers make informed decisions so that it does not greatly impact folks like myself and some of you in the session right now. Okay, and then another benefit in this space would be, of course, customer service, especially in the government. So, things like chatbots can be leveraged to enhance our interactions with government operations and help us get faster and more accurate responses. An example that comes to my mind, of course, is like the DMV. We all have spent hours and hours, sometimes a full day at the DMV, just to get renewals. And as we've seen, they're making the process that much more efficient. But this is an area where, AI is improving the customer service. So that's also another benefit. And then getting into the natural language processing. So something like this can be leveraged for improving the process of legal documents, and then even again communication between us and the government. So any type of processing that they're doing, they can leverage AI to speed up the service. And then, of course, security and fraud detection. I mean, this is Very, very, very important. We know that fraud is prevalent in this day and age. So, Gen AI can strengthen the cybersecurity measures and detect different type of anomalies and help identify any potential fraudulent activities to protect government systems and data, because we know the government has quite a bit of our data. Very, very personal information, if you will. And then, of course, lastly, emergency response planning. And in essence, AI can assist in predicting and planning the responses, for example, around natural disasters or any type of emergencies, and just helping to optimize the resource allocation and coordination when it comes to any type of, again, emergency response and planning. Okay, so then moving on to some of the safety concerns and considerations around AI. So, it is important for the government to try and foster a responsible and transparent usage to, again, minimize any harmful um things that can come up. And then again, promoting just positive outcomes for society as a whole. So, we know that there is a concern around the ethical usage of generative AI, especially around just data that is used to train these models. If there's any type of bias being inputted to these models, then essentially the outcomes that is being generated from the Gen AI models will also have some biases in it. And then also just around just how the ethics of it, right? So if government operations are not properly operating from an ethical standpoint, then again, these models that are going to be spitting out information will have quite a few biases and things that will have to be filtered out. So in terms of addressing the concerns around ethical usage, so essentially they can be applied into decision making processes, excuse me. And then in areas such as law enforcement, healthcare, and public services, they can ethically be generated so that they can improve law enforcement processes versus harming citizens and further perpetuating any discrimination. And then in terms of bias and fairness, excuse me, um, it would be very important to ensure that these data sets are trained on diverse and unbiased, are trained on diverse and unbiased data sets, excuse me, again, to help prevent any type of perpetuation of existing um, uh, unconscious bias. And then again, we're just trying to promote fair and equitable outcomes. Okay, and then we'll get into job displacement. So, around job displacement, we know that there are tons of workers in this space who are, again, concerned that AI is going to take over their roles. So, how this can be mitigated is to think through strategies for reskilling the workforce and just helping them adapt whatever skills they do have, or again, upskilling them so that those skills can be leveraged as AI is increasing and AI is becoming part of our day-to-day activities. And then also just thinking through how um, AI has had such a strong societal impact. Again, think through what strategies can be leveraged to upskill these workers so that as AI is impacting society, they are not further impacted and now having to think through, what is their next move. Okay. So then getting into another safety concern around privacy issues. So we know that the handling of citizen data does pose privacy risk, especially sensitive citizen data. So it's very important to implement robust measures to protect the privacy of citizens when handling their data. And then, of course, this will also incorporate anonymizing data where possible. And then again, ensuring compliance with data protection regulations. So these are some ways to kind of address the privacy concerns around the handling of sensitive citizen data. And then lastly, we'll get into the security risk around the system, especially around this technology. We know that cyber attacks are prevalent. So it is important to ensure that these AI applications are robust enough to help prevent malicious exploitation or any type of manipulation. And then, of course, they need to be like these systems would need to safeguard against security threats and any potential misuse. And again, there should be a heavy focus on unauthorized access. Um, in terms of just the exploitation of these technologies. Okay, so in terms of addressing these risks, of course, these will be ongoing efforts that the government will have to think through, or even, as I mentioned, as a client or as a consultant whose clients are mostly government agencies. These are things that we'll need to ensure that we're thinking through around the strategies and making sure that we're collaborating with the policymakers to foster the beneficial use of Gen AI. Okay, so continuing on, as we have talked about some of these safety concerns and considerations. So the keyword today, as I mentioned, is all around safe. So as we are thinking through safe deployment and safe usage, we have to focus in on security measures and how to protect data. So, first and foremost, we know that definitely there needs to be robust security measures, as I mentioned before, to protect against all the different threats. What have you, and malicious attacks. So, I'm just going to touch on some of the security measures that can be implemented. So, of course, data security. So this would be all around just encrypting sensitive data, the storage and transmission to prevent unauthorized access. And then, of course, implementing secure data storage practices. And again, these processes and like the accesses, they'll need to be regularly audited to maintain continuous data security. And then, as we're talking about access, of course, access controls and authentication is very important. So there needs to be strict access controls to prevent any unauthorized personnel from having access, and then just monitoring and logging user activities, right, to properly detect those unauthorized accesses. And then in terms of authentication, there needs to be a strong authentication mechanism to, of course, verify identity of all users and then implement any type of role-based, again, access controls to restrict permissions. And then lastly, on this section of security measures, of course, network security and protected infrastructure is always on the list. Again, making sure that there are proper firewalls and any type of intrusion detection and prevention systems, and making sure that there are secure network configurations on these AI systems. Okay, so then we're going to continue on with some additional security measures because, as I mentioned, the uh, keyword for today is safe. So another key implementation strategy for securing the GenAI systems would be, of course, this will start from the root of it, having secure development practices, right? Making sure that developers are following the coding practices during the development phases to mitigate any vulnerabilities, right? And then conducting just regular security assessments and code reviews to identify anything that will come up. And then another security measure would be to have an incident response plan because we know as much as you can plan and try to safeguard. Um, data and have a robust security protocol in place, there are mishaps that that come up. So there needs to be a proper incident response plan to quickly and effectively respond whenever there are security incidents, including breaches and, as I mentioned before, unauthorized access. And then lastly would be regular audits and assessments. So, of course, regularly just reviewing these systems again to address potential vulnerabilities, because you want to have a proactive approach versus having a reactive stance. When an unauthorized access occurs. And then it will be also important to engage any third-party security experts regarding these regular audits and assessments to ensure that there is that fresh mind looking into these Gen AI systems that is not specifically in the organization where that Gen AI system was built. So that sums up these security measures, and in essence, these are to contribute to a comprehensive security posture and to help safeguard the Gen AI systems that are being deployed in government operations. Because again, there will be risks, so it's important to think through how to mitigate these risks and continue to monitor and update any essential measures, right, to respond to the security threats. Okay, great. So moving on, now that we've covered the security measures, again, keyword for today is safe. So how can we continue to keep these systems safe? Of course, security frameworks come into play. Now, we know that there aren't, as of now at least, there aren't specific security frameworks just for generative AI. These frameworks are more so around just cybersecurity and just security overall, honestly. And it kind of just touches on some of the best practices that can enhance the overall, again, security measures of the systems. So, just real quick, of some of the commonly used frameworks just within the security atmosphere that are also applicable to Gen AI systems. Because again, there aren't specific frameworks around generative AI, but all these are important. So, real quick, we'll run through these. So we know that the NIST cybersecurity framework. So this, of course, provides a comprehensive approach to managing and improving organizational cybersecurity. So this will be great in terms of identifying, protecting, responding, and having a recovery approach for whenever an unauthorized attack does happen. So then we'll look at the ISO 27001. So this standard outlines the requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and then continually improving on information security management systems. And it does offer a broad range of security controls, again, that can be applicable to Gen AI systems. And then, thirdly, we'll look at the factor analysis of information risk. The acronym for that is FAIR. That framework helps to understand and analyze and quantify the information that could be at risk. So again, this can also be applied to assess and just manage any type of risk associated with Gen AI implementations. And then lastly, is the zero trust security model. So this one is not necessarily, or this one is not specifically a framework, it's more of a model. However, it emphasizes a very important principle of not trusting any entity inside or outside an organization's network, because sometimes we know that attacks can happen from inside of the network. So this model, it helps implement, this zero trust approach to again enhance the security of the systems. And this one requires, authentication and proper authorization for every single access attempt. So, of course, these frameworks will need to be adapted to the unique characteristics of the Gen AI system deployed within the organization. And of course, regular security measures will still need to be in place in conjunction with these frameworks and just helping to respond to any emergent threats. And I think per the industry as well, of course, the framework will also need to be adapted depending on the industry and then what the specific regulatory requirements um, within the specific country would be. So as we are continuing on, we'll get into some of the regulatory compliance around just Gen AI, around AI um, overall, actually. So, because this is a worldwide, and we'll call it an initiative because it's not just happening in the US. The United States is not the only country that is implementing and deploying Gen AI systems. So, there are some data protection and privacy laws that are relevant across the globe, if you will. And then, it's important to also adhere to, what's happening in terms of like data protection and privacy laws within other countries, especially if something that's going to be deployed that would be used by individuals not in your specific country. So, real quick, just to touch on some of the compliance laws. So, we know that the European Union, they do have a general data protection and regulation law in place, which this is mostly a framework to protect the personal data use within the EU. And it basically just establishes some principles such as data minimization, purpose limitation, and again, things that are relevant to AI systems overall, not just Gen AI. And then in the US, so we'll hone in on what's happening in the US. So we just picked one law to touch on today. So we know that in California there is this Privacy Act that has been implemented to specifically support, if you will, the collection and or to safeguard the collection and use of personal information that businesses are going to leverage from everyday citizens like you and myself. And then it also includes some like provisions related to transparency, access, and then deletion of personal data once these businesses are no longer using your data anymore. And then we'll go all the way out to India. So India also has a personal data protection bill. So basically, again, this is all around the protection of personal data, and it does regulate the processing of it. And then there have been provisions implemented that relate to like data localization and then individual consent. And then, of course, like rights of data subjects. And then lastly, there is a Privacy Act in Australia, which also regulates and handles or regulates the handling of personal information by government agencies and also in certain private sectors. And it also includes just principles concerning the collection, usage, and disclosure of personal data. So, this is just a brief summary of some of the different privacy and compliance laws around the globe. Again, because we know that data protection is very important when dealing with this Gen AI system. So not only is it important to think through the security measures, the frameworks, it's also important to take into account any type of privacy law that is in place. So this is just a reminder to also stay informed about any type of existing laws, not only in the U.S. but outside the U.S. in case you are come into contact or having to deploy any type of system that is going to be used or leveraged by citizens outside of the US. Okay, so then lastly, we'll get into some use cases. So, real quick, we know that Gen AI is being used. I mean, actually, it's AI in general has been around for some time. I know, if I'm not mistaken, Gen AI kind of made its big debut in around 2017. So even though as of late, there's been more buzz around Gen AI. There are some government uh, agencies and even in the commercial space that have leveraged Gen AI and are using it for different things. So we just spotlighted some use cases that you all could be familiar with, that you may or may not have known were AI models. So for example, we know that the Department of Education does leverage a chatbot. Some of you may have used it, some of you may have not, but I think this is great because sometimes when you are uh, dialing, the student aid, studentaid.gov just to get some information, you are on long lines and you are waiting hours and hours just to get some questions answered. So it's great that there is a chatbot, that can be leveraged just to answer some common like financial aid questions and to kind of help us get information, just around federal aid. And then next, the Department of Homeland Security. So this one was pretty cool when I was learning about it. So they have certain analytics, or they have a model for analytics around survey responses. So basically, what it does is that it analyzes and extracts any type of significant topics or themes from open ended survey responses. And the idea is that it helps them kind of formulate and group these open ended questions into categories to kind of help them make more informed decisions, right? Just around not only citizens, but again, even surveys that they have for their internal employees, it can help them improve any type of improve their job satisfaction or work environment as well. But more so, this is around just like further aiding in the analysis of open-ended survey questions. And then lastly, I also thought this one was pretty interesting from the Department of Veteran Affairs. So there is an automatic speech transcription engine where via the recorded speech of patients, it is able to transcribe their speech and help identify or even try to do some analysis on any type of, neurophysical physiological tests. And this is more so to help them around, any cognitive decline, especially for older veterans, right? So this speech recognition model or engine, just based on what the veterans will say, it can help detect some of these, as I mentioned, cognitive decline or any type of mental deformities, if you will. So these are just some quick use cases in the AI space. So to round it out, the session today. So we know we talked about some really great concepts, and again, the key word for today is all around safety and security. So, um, just to run out real quick, so we know there are great benefits in the Gen AI space, and oh, sorry, one second. Okay. I think you all can still see my screen. Okay, but real quick to round it out, so we know there are great benefits and opportunities in Gen AI. These can be incorporated to improve the efficiency, decision making, and citizen services. And then, in terms of the safely deploying these Gen AI systems, of course, you have to take into account all the security measures. You have to take into account the frameworks, and then also, the data protection and compliance law. So, we're looking at data security, access controls, network security, frameworks such as NIST, and then, as I mentioned before, there are some. Uh, the policies and laws that have been put in place that are global that will also need to be taken into account. And then lastly, with the use cases, uh, it was good to see that there are some uh, government agencies that are already leveraging Gen AI. So, as we just saw, the Department of Education is using a chatbot, Homeland Security is using a model, and then Veteran Affairs as well is also using an engine. So, these are just awesome, great use cases in the space. So, that is the end of my presentation today. So, I am on LinkedIn. So, definitely feel free to connect with me. If you would love to talk some more about generative AI, if you'd love to talk about government and consulting, or just anything about this presentation that you may not be able to get to today, and just scan the QR code because we are in tech. So, let's be innovative. So, scan the QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Queen, you killed it.